Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good afternoon to those joining us from places outside the central region, outside Southern Africa. It's my singular pleasure to welcome you all to the Institute for Security Studies, a Pan-African think tank that has championed human security for the past 34 years. My name is Martin Ewi. I am the Southern Africa Organized Crime Observatory Coordinator for the ENACT project here at the Institute for Security Studies. And for the next 90 minutes, I will be your moderator. ENACT is an acronym for Enhancing Africa's Response to Transnational Organized Crime. The project is funded by the European Union and implemented by a consortium of 3 partners: the Institute for Security Studies, Interpol, and the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Today's seminar focuses on the Nigerian confraternities in South Africa, which we ask the question, is it a brotherhood or a criminal enterprise? The main purpose of this seminar is to launch one of our newest research papers on the Black Ass confraternity, authored by Dr. Ndibusi Christian Annie, seated here to my right. He is senior researcher and project coordinator with the ENACT project at the ISS. The Black Ass confraternity is one of the most prominent, notorious, and perhaps the fiercest confraternity that we know in Africa. In 2019, in her co-authored book titled Nigerian Mafia: Origins, Rituals, Crimes, and in a speech to Parliament, the current Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, described the Black Ass as one of the most dangerous and ferocious criminal organizations in the world. The Italian police that is fighting the Sicilian mafia described the group as the biggest threat to Italy, meaning that the Black Ass has replaced the Sicilian groups as the most fiercest organized crime or mafia groups in the world. The BBC described it as an ultra-violent mafia group or ultra-violent group that has become a mafia. In Canada, they describe it as the worst organized crime group. According to the BBC work, the confraternity, the Black Ass confraternity, is represented in over 80 countries in the world. And this was actually in 2021. And we know that the Black Ass has been expanding since then. Despite the critical role that South Africa plays in the evolution of the Black Ass, the presence, the history, and activities of the Black Ass in South Africa have remained largely in obscurity. It is little known to South African law enforcement agencies, the media, and research organizations in the country. I therefore want to congratulate Christian for taking this bold step in digging further to reveal a lot about this group in South Africa. This seminar is funded by the European Union through its funding to the ENACT project. The seminar will formally was supposed to be opened by the European Union, but we have not received any confirmation. So we will indeed move straight to the presentations that we have for you. So we'll have Christian first, who will open the discussion with a presentation of the key findings of his paper. And then that will be followed by a panel discussion. 2 of the panelists will be joining us online. And we have Emma here, who will be with us. I will take just very briefly to introduce the panelists. Mr. Daniel Bombashe is the Director of Organized Crime Observatory for Europe with the Global Initiative against Transnational Organized Crime. He is joining us online. He will be followed by Professor Etenebi Alemika, who is Professor of Criminology and Sociology of Law at the University of Jos, Nigeria, in Nigeria, of course. He is also joining us virtually. Ms. Emma van der Wal, who is seated here with us in the room, the founder and chief executive officer of the organization called Brave to Love, which is a South African non-profit organization. So Emma is here with us in the room. So in the order of presentations, we will start off, as I said before, with Christian. That will be followed by Daniel. Etenebi will then follow, and then we'll conclude the panel discussion with Emma. We will proceed in this manner. We try to make this as conversational as much as possible. That means that I will ask each speaker 2 questions separately, and each speaker will take not more than 7 minutes to respond to the question. Please, before we start, I just want to remind you to mute your telephones. And for those joining us online, please mute your microphones, mute your telephones also. So once the panelists have provided their reflections, we will then open the floor for discussion. Given the serious shortage of time, participants are strongly advised to pose their questions or make their comments using the chat function for those of you joining online. And for those of you who are in the room, we will advise that you make your comment under 1 minute. Without much ado, I would like to call on Christian. If you can please give us an overview of your paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. I think you gave a very beautiful introduction to the discussion, and it's quite interesting how different accounts have kind of summarized the image of the Black Ass across the globe. So what I plan to do right now is to go into that discussion, and then also to look at the trajectories of Black Ass engagement in South Africa. What we have seen also that over the past 5 years, we saw significant interaction between the South African law enforcement agencies and across the globe with the Black Ass confraternities, starting from 2021 when there was arrest of about 8 Black Ass members in Cape Town, and then this has continued to follow. Several arrests. You have about 8 others arrested in Johannesburg, several others arrested across the South Africa area. And this has kind of raised debate, how do we then understand this confraternity that says, okay, we are a peace-loving and humanitarian organization, and against what is happening, with the organization, and how members are being linked, and how Martin has already described it as, different organizations seeing it as an organized criminal enterprise. The Black Ass itself have come out, the New Black Movement of Africa has come out gun blazing, saying that no, it's not. It doesn't belong to. It's not one and the same as Black Ass, and also it's not a criminal organization. So how do we understand it? Then ENACT decided, with Eric Pelter and also CAT support, we decided to look deeply into the issue to kind of see, if the ideals of confraternities are advanced to criminality, then why are they linked to crime in that way? And also, if confraternities are complicit, how do we understand, their level of involvement within crime, and how do we begin to understand them properly? So what I'll do is take us through a little bit of the origin, the strategies for growth, going into the organizational structure, the identity crisis and the global expansion of the group. Then we go into the Black as engagement here in South Africa proper, some of what they do here in South Africa, and then some of the key takeaways and the recommendations that we can look into. So this research has come through a year-long research. We've been on this, digging deep into relevant materials, primary resources, looking at what is the media saying, what are judicial case files saying, what are some of the data from national authorities, and what are some of the data from the Black Ass itself, what is it saying? And also we spoke extensively to key informants from the Black Ass, trying to understand, what they do, but not just the Black Ass. We need to understand that there are several other confraternities that are operating, within South Africa and across the globe as well. And then we did a social media analysis also to understand the phenomenon. Now, going into a little bit of the history, trying to look at the ideology and the realities of the Black Ass. One of the first things that we need to know is that, the confraternities emerged around the 1950s, when Wole Soyinka, one of the first Nigerian Nobel laureates in Africa, kind of formed the pirate confraternity. And the sole aim was, to propagate Pan-Africanism, within the university setup. These are students who are, looking for how to make an impact across the globe. And that follows the trend of other confraternities, including the Black Ass, which was established in 1977, trying to ensure that, okay, they promote social justice, equality, and the likes. And for South Africa, it's quite relevant that it was just after the 1976 activism, that got several youths being killed from the Soweto uprising. And, a lot of youth within Nigeria, and Nigeria being a frontline state, kind of said, okay, let's form a group to continue propagating social justice and equality for the Black person. So that was how this started. And we need to bear in mind also for South African audience that, the annual convention for these Black Ass is always organized around, the Sharpeville massacre of the 1960s. So every March, they kind of try to make sure that the convention is situated around that. But there are also local realities that gave birth to this confraternity, things like elitism. The other groups that were already there, for instance, when we're talking of the Pirates group and then also the Buccaneers, they were already, key players there, and they were recruiting people based on intelligence. These people were like the elites of the elites within the university setup, and also as lecturers and all that. And they also wanted to, deconstruct that aspect and then make it a little bit more liberal for people to easily join confraternities when they need to join in. And then, there's also the issue of dominance as well, that, within that setup, there are already other confraternities, but Benin, also considering the traditional structure, also wanted to have a homegrown movement from their own side. So that's how that setup came up. The pictures here are just of the barracks of some of the, confraternities. These are some of their identifiers. For instance, the Black Ass itself, which is also known as Aye, for instance, have the black and the yellow ribbon underneath there. So what happened? How did they try to get their members? This is quite very crucial because it kind of gives us an idea of what is happening today. Is that they kind of liberalized that process of membership, and instead of going forward to get people from the high intellectual echelon. One of the, not a mistake, but also something that happened that a lot of members are complaining about is that they let every person to join in, and they begin to, and then you find supposedly rogue elements also getting in, and different people with different perspectives getting into the group. And also just a little bit about the, just not just universities. Initially, it was they all started from the universities, but today there are claims that, you have people who are within secondary schools and disadvantaged setup who are also part of the group. And then the second thing is also a culture of violence that grew among the group, trying to propagate their ideals, and then there are issues that, some of these members then began to assert themselves through the use of violence to make their cases known in society. And we need to also know that, within the 1980s and also 1970s itself, there was a lot of military coups and dictatorship in Nigeria. So for some academics, that kind of normalized the use of violence as a way of propagating, ideals within that. And the chart over here kind of, gives an indication of some of the reasons why they get engaged in violence. For instance, it can be during the rites of passage, some of the, colonization processes are always seen as very violent currently, which didn't used to be the case, but then it became very violent. Members go through, a lot of grueling tests for them to be members. There's a lot of disciplinary measures for members as well, where necessary. And then they also take the oath of secrecy, to keep each other and to support each other where necessary. And then there's also that aspect of rivalry between confraternities. So if any confraternity gets on, intimidates a fellow confraternity member, the whole group comes in to support that member. And this aspect is quite critical for how we do engage going forward. You have the internal disputes that is also critical here. And then you also have violence that is linked to members' involvement in illicit economies, and then, there are several activities that they have been involved in terms of illicit economies, but as individuals, quite significant there. But then what happens is that, they recruit among their membership and do this engagement and also support members when necessary. So those are kind of very, identify some of the culture of violence that began to grow within these groups over time. Then the organizational structure here kind of gives an idea of who belongs to where and, who falls where. For instance, you have the national body, which is the worldwide leadership, having there's the National Executive Committee. On your left-hand side, you see the National Executive Committee headed by the national head. Then you have the National Chief Priest, who is the Vice President, and different other titles that are there. But then you also have the National, Council of Elders, who are also critical in terms of, advising the movement, and also headed by the chairman, and then also the scribe as well. So when you look at the constitution as well, you find this some of these identifiers of who belongs to where. And then when you go from that national head leadership that is headquartered in Benin, then you come to the regional level. So because they have expanded, I will speak to the global expansion, they have expanded across the globe, then they now decided to group themselves within regions, different zones, zonal structures, as indicated here, group themselves within regions, and then they then, have a leadership, a regional head heading that regional bodies. And then you have the zonal structure where this is the operational arm, this is the operational aspect of this group. And then from there, they also have the same kind of leadership as the national head. For instance, when we say ZESCO, we mean the Zonal Executive Committee. When we say the ZCOE, we mean the Zonal Council of Elders. And then coming back to the temple. The temple now, it's called the High Temple because like the mother place, the universities are the mother place. After, the students formed this group within the university setup, they graduated. And after that graduation, they kind of now started setting up different structures across board. Then the temple became like, this is where people are then recruited into the movement. So most of the recruits come from the university setup. And besides, before you can join a member, you can either be an undergraduate, or when you've graduated, you become a lord. They call it a lord. That's why sometimes they call themselves a lord. I'll get back to that a little bit. On the side here is just an identifier of who, in terms of hierarchy, who is the lead where necessary. But you need to know that it's all stipulated within the constitution of the group. This is just, based on information that we kind of gathered around, who belongs to where, and they are across the globe. There's nowhere they are not, So they are across the globe and well registered within, constitutionally within each country, where they are. In South Africa, they also have registrations here. We'll get back to it later on. But across here, they're registered there. And, that's why, when you give litigations against a group, they also bring their own litigations, that they're a humanitarian group. They're not hiding themselves. They're not underground, even though sometimes members try to stay out of public domain. But they're not, they're a legit group in that way. A little bit also about the drivers of expansion. Quickly before that, first of all, United States has one of the highest membership. And then you come to the United Kingdom, where it also have high membership. South Africa has the third highest, and then the highest in Africa in terms of zones. And there are three things that lead to this expansion. First, Nigerians travel a lot. You have the Japa syndrome that has been driving a lot of mass migration of Nigerians, especially from those coming from Edo State and also the Southeast region, but they travel a lot. The second aspect is also the threat-based decision. Because of the violence that I indicated before, some of the members, immediately after the university studies, they leave the country. They have to leave, or even before the graduation or just after graduation. Either the family members sponsor them to leave the country because they are targets of other confraternities that want to harm them, or they are target of factions within those groups that want to harm them, and they have to leave. And there have been cases of various families sending their wards out of the country for their safety. And then we also have the syndicate strategy, where specific group, either business groups or criminal groups, then send their group, their colleagues, also, or encourage them to travel abroad as well, to expand that movement so that they can be able to have a global base. And sometimes also because of the influence that some criminal enterprises end up having, then you end up finding people who are a little bit criminally inclined in some of the diaspora communities, being dominant actors within those setups. Now, let's speak about the identity crisis. Before we come back to the South Africa proper, I think it's very important for us to look at the identity crisis. There has been several things, including what Martin spoke about, as this group is being seen as an traditional mafia setup. But they are not that. They're saying that their constitution is not inclined for that, and they're not operating as that. And they also say that they are not black ass. For instance, the new black ass movement say that they are not one and the same thing as the black ass, because the black ass has often been linked to criminality. So people they can we're not that. But when you look at the group, they share the same membership. The same people that were arrested in Cape Town, for instance, are the same Black Ass members and are the same in the new Black Ass movement. And since in the 1970s and 80s, when they were established, they used used to run a magazine called the Black Ass. which then stuck into their name, and then people continue to use them. And the whole idea of that the axe is their identifier kind of remained as their name going forward. But they have consistently contested that and are continuously, challenging people about that. And they have been trying to do some effort around rebranding by suspending convicted members. Whenever someone is being reported to be convicted, they suspend the person. But they don't do that proactively before. It's only when the case comes out, then they suspend the person to say, okay, we, within our constitution, which rightly says so, the constitution says does not allow people to be involved in criminality. So it's a very important thing. And there's also a high-profile deactivations. When they were trying to rebrand themselves, there's been high leaders like 3 former national heads and also the Cape Town colleagues that were suspended because of their involvement in criminal activities. But one thing is that they don't do it before the fact. And there's also been symbolic changes. People are, even the members are still, fighting this, that why are they saying that Black Ass was formed in October 16, 1977 instead of July 1977? Because the number 7 is a huge identifier for the group. It reflects the acts. It also reflects that this is the movement itself. So they're also trying to, clean up and then say, this is how we are cooperating. In one of their last meetings, April, for instance, they started up a state of emergency, trying to say, okay, we are trying to, engage the litigations against our members, and then are also trying to revise their constitution to engage the world in different ways. But despite these measures, what continues to persist is that some members are still implicated in criminality. But now let's come back to one of the critical issues. Why would they be linked to crimes if they are not part of it? For instance, when you look at the structure, the Black Ass will not get its members and say, go and commit this crime, go and commit so crime, and come back and give me proceeds. There's no hierarchy in that order that does that. There's no strategic engagement as such. There's also diverse professional membership. For instance, we are talking of lecturers, we are talking of doctors, we are talking of politicians and security personnel, which kind of also shows, that the group is highly connected and deeply connected as such. How does the group get its money? They have levies. Every year they send about 500,000 naira, which is a marginal amount of money for the running of the national body, and then secondly for their conventions, which I spoke to you earlier, that they have it around March. And then they also get from voluntary contribution. And sometimes this becomes a key way that some members within the group use to get leverage on how the group operates. Now, also, why do criminal syndicates kind of, get members to be involved here? Or why do they operate within this group? One of the things is that, because you can ask yourself, I think there's one of the recurring questions is, people belong to different associations. Then why is it that the association to Black Ass is then, and the Black Ass as an organization is seen as, the criminal group, and then no crime has been definitely linked as an organizational body. But one of the things is that some criminal syndicates find it, very comfortable to recruit within the battle-hardened members of the group. And you can note, as we spoke earlier about that, the initiation process goes through, high rituals and oaths of secrecy and loyalty, and members who have been exposed to a lot of violent behavior for some time. So it's very good to, recruit people from this group than anywhere else, and that kind of keeps your secret within the group and also makes it reliable. So they become more like families within that sector. And then also the protection racket that the group does. One, the culture of violence, as I spoke to you about, that if you touch me, an offense against me, it's an offense against all. So for you to, within the criminal underworld, if you have an issue that is linked to any other member or any other confraternity, you easily come back to confraternity and tell them, okay, this is the issue you're having. How do they help you to sort that out? And we'll look at how that plays out when we're discussing the South Africa case. And then there's also resource support, like providing legal fees, to members, and providing necessary support to members on how to operate where necessary. Now we come to South Africa. The evolution of the South Africa case, since the 1990s, they have been existing within South Africa, but some of the first zonal structures, started to emerge in the early 2000s, with them registered, and you can get that they also registered within South Africa as in 2007, as an NPO, having the full name of the New Black Ass Movement there, New Black Movement of Africa, which is, they're registered and they're legit as such. South Africa zone was one of the first zone, but if you see within the zonal structures here, that they are not part of it because there was a conflict that brew this earlier this year, and then the South Africa zone was disbanded, even though the members still say that they will continue to operate. And there's been a change of leadership, so there's still revisiting about whether the South Africa zone will re-emerge and where necessary. And just another pointer also is that because South Africa zone was the first zone, and they have different branches or forums across Africa. So initially they use the name South Africa Zone. They use the country as the identifier of the zonal structures. But over time, because of the expansion of the group, there is large membership, they began to use the city names. So at some point, they might begin to use a more devolved name of the country. So for instance, now they have Cape Town, Durban, Northwest Gauteng Zone, and all that names. And then we also have leadership within them. You take on, you can go for 5 years, and after that, as a leadership, then you can go down to having membership within the Council of Elders accordingly. And then the table here just kind of identifies who belongs to where and how that happens. Now, let's speak a little bit about the internal disputes, because it's an association as well. So they also face their internal issues among themselves. And one of the biggest issues that they have faced here is the introduction of or the formation of new kind of zonal structures. First, it started with the West-North Gauteng zone in late 2024, when the former head decided that he's going to establish more zones within South Africa setup. That led to a huge backlash. The South Africa, and that came on like kind of dividing up the South Africa zone, which is operating here in Johannesburg, divided them up and then said they have their own zone, and then members couldn't have it. There were different factions, having conflicts among themselves, all across both Kempton Park and here in Johannesburg as well. So because of the dispute that they were having with the national head in Nigeria, the national head and the National Executive Committee decided to dismantle the South Africa zone entirely. So when they dismantled, they also established the Johannesburg zone and the Pretoria zone. Before, the Pretoria zone and the Johannesburg zone were more like forums or sub-zonal structures within the group. And then there were accusations among each other that there's money politics going on between the national head. But some of these are issues that different organizations face accordingly. But then let's come back then to, what activities have been, linked to them here in South Africa in terms of crime. So when we see between 2021 and 2025, cybercrime is one of the critical issues that most of them have been involved in, and not all of the Black Ass members, but I mean those who have been arrested have been linked directly to cybercrimes, issues of internet fraud, advanced fee scams, whether it's identity theft or money laundering. And some of these cases originated from the US. Most of the issues, the people that they defrauded came from the US. I think a few other cases came from issues like the Tinder swindler who defrauded a South African woman of about 500,000 USD and then was arrested here. But for the cases of the internet fraud, you have, they were indicted for about 17 million USD for defrauding, companies of 17 million USD. Just 2 companies alone lost about 2 million within the heist from this group, from these syndicate structures. Now, just a little bit that romance scam is one of the critical thing or one of the main things that they do within this whole setup when we're talking of the internet fraud. Romance scam is a critical operation there, and predominantly elderly people are victims. Not to, but then elderly people are victims also because they're advanced in internet use. And then they also know how to use cryptocurrencies. And these are individuals committing this crime or syndicate structures that are relying on the structure to operate. Then you also have cases of credit card fraud, especially women being used in this. So there are 2 things to this romance scam. One, they can use the romance scam to defraud you, and then 2, they can use that as a process of money laundering, in the sense that they can get into relationship with someone wherever it is, get people to deposit money into your account, and it's been taken out. Now, there's also the issue of drug trafficking among members. In this case, when we speak about the drug trafficking case, there has been very little case about it, especially in the South African context. Also because the South African government and law enforcement agencies, they know very little about confraternities, understandably. But because of that lack of knowledge, there's no extensive investigation to see who belongs to where, which confraternities, and how do they operate where necessary within these confraternities. So there's been several cases of different drug busts that, when we look at the individuals involved, we realize that, okay, this person belonged or have association with this group. And then we also have issues of, people claiming that they were being used as drug mules by some specific persons, and that's also been confirmed by some of the members that some of their members are involved in these activities, whether it's street level trading or getting people to be involved as drug mules. And then you also have some of the areas that they operate, but across South Africa. Yeah, and then I think the Brave to Love team will also speak a little bit more about this. There's a whole lot about Nigerians being involved here. But as I said, there's no identifier that, this is the confraternity that they belong to when operating. But then when you dig into the specific individuals, then you see that they have a membership within the group. And why does the membership within the group become specific relevant is because of that protective structure that they do provide for for members. So now, also the money laundering aspect, there are several cases that we have with about money mules that have been used. For instance, there was a time 2 South African ladies were used, to receive money from people that were scammed abroad. Then they received these funds into their bank account, and then they were directed to, redistribute these funds to different group members and to different cryptocurrency accounts. And they did that. About 8 of the syndicates were arrested here in Johannesburg, So that kind of, highlights, how they do operate and get people to become conspirators and sometimes women fall victims of this often. And then, as I highlighted earlier on, the security guarantees is a critical point where then the confraternity as a confraternity joins in here. Because if someone defrauds you, anywhere, whether it's in Russia or let's say you defraud someone and then the money's you are the money mule and the money comes into your account and you're supposed to deposit the money to someone else and you do not do that, they can get through the global network, they can get, mobilize them to engage you. And they know that the process or that activity is of crime, but they still, kind of shield it and then don't report it where necessary, but they do, protect their members or go and fight for the cause of their members. Now, a little bit about the complex money laundering methods. I'll not go so much into this because we all know how money laundering happens through sham companies, and these are some of the cases that have been reported. And also the purchase of high value items. They can purchase really high value items, maybe like very nice cars, send them over here and then resell them, just to get the cash itself, or get people that they have defrauded to buy those high value items and send it over here. And then some of the early users of cryptocurrencies, which is a very good channel for laundering. Now, what are some of the key organizational insights that we should take away from our discussion today? The key takeaways first is that, criminal syndicates or individuals and syndicate structures operate totally independently of confraternities. They do their thing. They operate their roles. They do have. There is no way that the Black Arts itself, as an organization, does not get the money trickling into, let's say, Black Arts account or an individual account that then split it across to individual members. That's not what happens within the Black Arts. So it's that individual structures. And then, but for you to understand that, you need to understand the network analysis, also a framework of understanding, okay, that this is an individual that committed a crime, and then how do we trace from this individual using the broader network that that individual has to trace other people who are involved in this crime. Then the second part that we need to take away is the elite influence. One of the things is the group, the confraternities, from that noble establishment, they've been hijacked. You don't have, they've been hijacked, and, criminal syndicates sometimes become, the lead and dominant figures within the group, so sometimes even if you arrest the highest people with the highest ranks, like in the Cape Town case, that doesn't mean that, that the organization is working, as a traditional mafia structure and operating, but that, these groups try to work their way up so that, when they need the protection racket and support from this group, they're able to mobilize themselves for their own benefit. They're able to communicate with structures here and with structures across the globe. Very significant. As I said, with the protection racket that they do provide. So now, very difficult recommendation to give within the complex way that this group works. First of all, for the Black Arts, because if they claim that they are legitimate organizations, we have to also take that responsibility of, suspending and expelling who are known for criminality, because they do know. So it's just that the oath of secrecy precludes them from, divulging on their members. And then also, first of all, they have to withdraw collective support for illicit activities, by stopping that, ending that more protection practices that they're engaging in. And, they have to start restructuring the recruitment to get graduates only and to get people who are within the professional lens only, and cooperate with authorities to begin to fish out who is it that belongs where. And for the South African government and the law enforcement agencies, they have to use that when they begin to know a lot about the confraternity structures. About the Black Arts is a confraternity, and you begin to understand that dynamics that work within them. You can work with these groups to begin to identify who is committing what crime and what other crime. I think there was a discussion that, you can't just go and then scoop in on all the Black Arts members and say, oh, they're having a meeting on this day, let's go and scoop in them because they're all involved in crime. It's a difficult thing to do because how then do you classify what particular crime that they are involved in, and then how do you build the case on. But if you're able to work with the national, with the leadership structure and, understand how they work, you can get the syndicates that are operating across board. And as you know, some of these syndicate structures are fluid and, sometimes individuals, sometimes within groups. And then there has to be strengthening of community prevention programs, especially when you bring more security to some of the inner communities where necessary. Then you begin to understand whether and provide improving law enforcement within some of that areas. Then much of the reliance on the protection that these confraternities give begins to reduce where necessary. And also there's also that aspect of collaborating with the Nigerian High Commission here to kind of understand what these confraternities mean, how they operate, and how they can work to address the challenges. So I think what I've done now is to make it more complicated for colleagues but the group highly operates within a legitimate setting. Then also within that illegitimate setting, when it comes to the protection racketeering that they tend to offer to members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The mouthful. I have quite a lot of notes and a lot of questions, comments, but I see that we are already running late, so I will keep those if an opportunity comes by. But I would like to proceed with the program by moving to Daniel. If you are there, Daniel, I want to ask you this question, drawing on parallels from what Christian has just said in terms of the Black Ass confraternity in South Africa. What are the primary operational modus operandi that you have witnessed in Europe? Is it similar to what Christian has just presented, or there are parallels or differences that you can highlight?
Thank you, Martin. And thank you, Christian, for the very interesting presentation, also the great report that I read with great interest. So the key question of brotherhood or criminal enterprise, you cannot respond to that question for Europe in general, because it really depends. I would definitely agree for what we see in Europe, there's no centralized criminal strategy moving Black X and MBM operations in Europe. It's very much localized. So we have heard, for example, about Italy. In Italy, I think it's safe to say that no one would ever say that Black X is a charity organization. In Italy, it's quite clear. Already 15 years ago, Italian courts have decided that Black X and Nigerian confraternities are a mafia-style organization and are being prosecuted with the same tools as any traditional Italian mafia. So it's quite clear they don't even try to pretend to be a charity organization in the country. They are territorial, like Italian mafia organizations. They are quite violent. They engage in highly visible crimes, such as street-level drug trafficking, in sexual exploitation, forced prostitution. So they're very, very visible in the criminal ecosystem in the country. When you look at Germany, I'm based in Germany, it's very, very different. So in Germany, there is, we just saw that it has temporarily been suspended Black X chapter zone in Germany. I will get to that later, but in Germany, traditionally, there has been a non-profit organization registered for NBM Germany. They pretend to do charity. They originally did engage in forced prostitution, human trafficking, but basically Black X and also other confraternities have pulled out of that. And they are almost exclusively engaging in non-visible crimes. That means, similar to the case of South Africa, where this seems to be quite dominant, scams, Roman scams, especially money laundering as a service, all sorts of financial crime, basically home office-based crimes, as compared to the street-level crimes that we see in Italy. So, and this has also triggered a completely different response. Right now in Germany, we have for the first time a situation that a court right now in Munich is trying to prove that NBM Germany and Black Axe are actually the same thing. So they have arrested last year the leadership of NBM Germany, and they are awaiting, or they are actually in court right now facing charges of money laundering, Roman scams, and building of a criminal organization. And that basically means this would be parallel to what has happened in Italy. So it's quite different in what we see across Europe, and the other cases. France is more similar to Italy, even though not so visible. Switzerland is very similar to the case of Germany. So we do see that there's a lot of leeway how the different chapters at a local level may evolve and may develop. And it's really driven by opportunity. It's driven by alliances with local actors. We see that a lot in Italy. We have just heard it with the quote of Prime Minister Meloni. Traditional alliances in Italy with other organized crime groups that we don't see in Germany. And it's very much, you can tell, the links are existent to a headquarter level. There's money flowing to the headquarter. There's people traveling from Europe a lot to Nigeria. So we do see that. But at a local level, it's very, very strong independence that we can see across the different countries.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was short and straight to the point. I like the point you have raised, which contrasts what we just heard from Christian about the conflation or the debate here in South Africa or even in Nigeria as to whether the Black Axe is a charity group or it is a criminal group. In Europe, from what you are saying, it is known as purely a criminal group based on their activities, whether it is in Italy where the criminality is more visible, or it's in Switzerland or Germany where the crimes are a lot more invisible. Thank you for raising that. Let me then turn to Professor Etenebi. Prof, drawing on your vast experience, you've been working on this for many years. To what extent are members' crimes directly linked to the Black Axe confraternity structure? Can you also describe the structure that they are linked to?
Thank you so much. I think I will start from where Daniel ended. And what he said is that location determines the character of perception of Black Axe or the NBM. I think we must know that this whole debate started with Italy through its peculiar legislation and activities of law enforcement. So depending on what a country determines to adopt, if you adopt the Italian version, you will see Black Axe as a criminal organization. If you adopt what we might call Christianities, South Africa, you will see them more or less as individual criminals leveraging on their membership of an organization. If you look at available researches outside of Italy, outside of Interpol, outside of UNODC, you will find that what we are discussing is more complex than the way it's presented. I think membership can leverage on different categories. And I think what Black Axe have done in many countries is to leverage on their membership of that organization, rather than the organization, as Christian Annie has rightly pointed out, rather than being agent of the organization, they are independent, autonomous actors, leveraging for facilitation of the activities and protection by leveraging on the membership of the organization. And to that extent, therefore, if they operate that way, you cannot call by any stretch of imagination in organizational crime studies, you cannot label the Black Axe as a criminal organization because it is not the one directing its members as a principal to act as an agent. And I think that's the core of the debate. Let me just say some, maybe it's important, some disclaimer. I went to universities in Nigeria in the 1970s. There were many confraternities, even before, as it's been said, they were never violent. I can assert that. The membership were known, they have a senior, they place them in their rooms, and people know they belong to that member. They were nuisance, they were irritant. Why do I say they are nuisance? They probably would drum, in the night when you are supposed to sleep in their celebration of maybe weekly activities. But besides that, they were nothing, problematic. And those who have taken the historical perspective, like Coretin Cohen, for example, notice that this whole dimension, which Christian also pointed out, which started in the 80s and is linked to authoritarianism in Nigeria within the universities, and then rivalry between the evolving confraternities. So I think the literature is not as rigorous as it ought to be. Thank you. I think I must comment two works that seem to have come out in recent times, now beginning to question the way we perceive this structure and the way they create a problem. I think one of them is by Coretin Cohen, and its second one is now by Christian Annie. I think that is important for us to adopt that complexity of a phenomenon. Our members, the criminals. In migration studies, you will discover that migrants leverage on their past histories and collectivity. Nigeria particularly has a history, even on urbanization, of leveraging on their home community associations to survive in urban areas. These are the different factors that are at play, which I think is vastly misunderstood by some literature. So going straight to whether they are linked, it's interesting, the opening statement, a lot of superlative panic that were associated with those organizations. In Nigeria, and I'm sure you know Martin and Christian, nobody wakes up any day and is afraid of black acts, except maybe in Benin City. So how then did they become, focus of these, countries using those adjectives, whether Canada, whether Italy, whether, I think we must be very careful about the use of profiling as part of anti-migration policy in the context that we are today. So basically, I think the structure that we're hearing is complex, but I think it's consistent to say it is the members that are committing crime, and there is no strong, significant evidence that they are doing it at the direction of the organization. And to that extent, we need to think very carefully how we label that organization. And I think, again, Christian brought this clearly in network analysis. And I think we begin to look at it rather than using the mafia analytical perspective which dominates the UNODC, Interpol, and the other analytical framework over the last 1.5 decades. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yes, indeed. I think the debate is coming together. You are saying that the Black Arts Confraternity has nothing to do with criminality, and that if that criminality exists, it's the actions of the individuals within the group. Christian did make a very serious recommendation that the group need to expel these individuals that are committing crimes. So, but we'll get into that. I want to call on someone who has been working on these issues on the ground. She's been on the front line. Emma, I want to turn to you to tell us, based on your experience, you've met these individuals, you've come across the activities, you've been fighting these activities. What do you think, what have you observed as the patterns of their victims' interaction, and how significant is confraternity membership in enabling these operations?
Thank you very much. Can I thank you? Yeah.
Sure, yes. You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you to Martin and thank you to Christian for thorough research and his time onto this. So about 10 years ago, as an NGO, we started bringing relief work for women working in prostitution, in the system of prostitution, and the reality struck us quite quick when we realized a lot of the pimps at that point managing the sex trade was Nigerian nationals. And then after that, we started realizing, but this is not only a lot of the brothel keeping were very much controlled, very much working together. And we started identifying who these pimps are, what are the locations they are operating from. And we started realizing this is sex trafficking, very clear signs of sex trafficking. A lot of the women were mainly South African women. We couldn't really find any Nigerian women, which is different than we find in Spain and some of the Europe countries. But we saw even minors, underage girls being brothels. The pattern, and we'll draw to the black axis now, but the patterns, what we saw was quite violent. The sex trafficking was violent. It looked like rituals, cult-related rituals that they were doing with the females, very brutal. They were specifically, the victims will tell me there is an enforcer, as we know in the black axis, called the butcher. When the girls do misbehave in any form, they will be sent to the enforcer, punish them, burn plastic, really brutal acts of violence, rape them, and in my book, I've published a book that was released last year called She Is Safe. And unfortunately, I didn't mention the nationality of the traffickers in the book, but 80% of the traffickers in the book mentioned, unfortunately, was Nigerian citizens, some of them illegal in the country. Or through fraudulent documents, or marrying South Africans to get documentation. So we saw a lot of criminal activity. It was not only sex trafficking happening, we actually started noticing a lot of other activity. So what we did with the investigation and with our team, we managed to work close with law enforcement in getting successful arrest on these individual traffickers, all of them male. I think there were 1 or 2 madams that were also arrested for working with that made that shift from being a victim to becoming actually a trafficker. But we started profiling these individuals on open source media, using social media, because a lot of them were quite open on social media. And we started seeing the black axis signs. We started doing research on it, and we started seeing the relation quite strong. We saw very clear structures, very strong networks, very strong patterns that they were working, and very strong relations. So it wasn't just one trafficker in a brothel trafficking 10 females. They were working so closely together from different areas within Gauteng to Rustenburg, Emalahleni, Kenton Park, Benoni, Ekurhuleni. And then when we started doing a lot of the arrests that's taken place in Gauteng, we actually saw a lot of the females being now trafficked to the Cape Town zone, as we call it, which they felt more comfortable with doing operation, but the investigations continue. So, yeah, so there was definitely a mafia pattern that was engaged in all of the investigations that we came up with. And we saw, the last thing I want to say, because I know we're short on time, was the money, the finances. We started saying, we started seeing structures. We started seeing your low-level pimp that was managing the girls, but we saw someone above him and someone above him. So we started seeing these authority levels, and we started asking, but where's the money? Because we knew how much they are getting for a female when they sell a female 10 times a day. And we were asking, but where is the money? Because the pimp is not wealthy. The pimp managing the brothel is not driving the Mercedes-Benz. Although we do see the black Mercedes-Benz dropping off the drugs or transporting the girls. And the girls knew all the traffickers. They knew the large network. And we started seeing actually the money would go back to Nigeria through different forms. It was going through NGOs. It was going through charity organizations. It was going through religious institutions. It was going through clubs, businesses where there's alcohol being sold for cash money. So there was flushing through the money. So yeah, it's a large topic. We're grateful for actually having success in freeing a lot of the women and having arrest on these cases. But it's a large organization, and we have to fight justice and freedom. And like I said, lastly, the organized crime aspect is very strong. It's not only the sex trafficking, it's the drug trafficking, it's the fraud. It's a large network of finding money for the business.
Thank you. In just about a minute or so. My second question to you, if you can take a minute just to answer it, is what specific intervention do you think we need to deal with the aspect of the confraternity?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that there's always a financial trace. I think when we fight human trafficking, we fight it as a whole, where even if you take down a trafficker, there's always a financial investigation that needs to happen, because there's always a money trace somewhere. And then when it comes to trafficking, it is a high priority crime to actually get some of these these traffickers arrested for a high priority crime is important, but to fight the criminal aspect in it. Yes, and there's so much more that we can say on the topic.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Let me encourage once more participants to send in their comments or questions, especially those online. Please, you can start sending through your questions online so that by the time we finish, we can already start answering them. And for those in the room, please just continue to note them down. We'll just go through the last round of questions and hear from them in terms of recommendations. Then we open the floor for general debate. Let me move to Professor Etenabi. Prof, what analytical framework most effectively explains the roles of confraternities in the criminal activities of their members?
Thank you, Martin. I think we are starting to get where we need to go in the logic of social analysis. We need to start a question as if we need to know, rather than we have answer, but we're looking for evidence. I think until recently, the whole question, which started about 1.5 decades ago, had been that we know the answer, that this group is a criminal group, and we're looking for evidence. And I think the last, I mentioned 2 papers particularly, by Corentin Cohen and then by now Annie Christian, is that we're now beginning to ask questions. Who are these criminals? Which group did they belong to? What's the relationship between them and the group? How much did they benefit? Does the group benefit? And it's interesting that Emma just concluded her presentation about where did the money go? To what extent is the Black Axe a beneficiary of the crime of its individual members? Because when you are talking of criminal organization, it's not for a profit. And therefore, if there is no kind of extensive benefit, we should begin to think about analytical framework. We should begin to think about our theoretical framework. And I think we are beginning to move in that direction. Luckily, I think in the last 2 decades, we are beginning to combine network analysis along with the mafia style. And I think this debate has been stifled from the beginning because the interest started from a country which has a mafia style of organized crime. And we had tried to impose that one on an analysis, and that has stifled our understanding of the phenomenon of like this matter of Black Axe. But we need to be very careful. The question I ask is, if I were a student of WITS in Johannesburg, 10,000 of us have graduated over 2 decades. Then 500 of us find ourselves in Lagos. And we knew each other, we knew what our institution, what are the kind of bond that may exist amongst us. If it's found that 10% of us have committed a crime, and we linked it to the fact that we're members or graduates of WITS, can we blame WITS as a criminal organization? That's my challenge. But I think network analysis, which asks who are committing the crime, who are their associates, how do they relate to one another? I think it will begin to make some kind of progress rather than the way we started originally 15 or 10 years ago. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Let me also ask Daniel. Daniel, can you share with us European experiences in responding to the Black Axe confraternity? You've talked about Italy, you've talked about Germany, Switzerland, and so on. What kind of responses have these countries made.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I know we don't have a lot of time. Let me also mention we also will have a report published in ENACT soon on African organized crime in Europe. There we have more details on it. But just very briefly, again, we have to differentiate between Italy and other European countries. So Italy has taken, as I mentioned before, basically an anti-mafia stance against Nigerian organized crime. So there has been quite a lot of operations and quite a lot of cases in court against members of different Nigerian confraternities, not only Black Axe, who's concentrating in the south, but also in the north. We have different other groups like, for example, Mafia-ites and others. So that has also led to a situation that Italy has a way better understanding actually how these confraternities work, what are their operations, what is their territorial reach in the country. And you don't have that in other European countries, because in other European countries, members of confraternities have been prosecuted, but individually for individual offenses and not the organizations as such. The recent or the ongoing court case in Munich may change that for Germany, because it's basically targeting the organization NBM/Black Axe as a whole, for the first time to find information in other European countries that are comparable to the situation that we have in Italy. Very often you have had cases, for example, related to what Emma just mentioned, human trafficking, sexual exploitation in European countries against Nigerian individuals, what reportedly may or may not be members of certain confraternities, but it has never been part of the case, because the case is based on the individual offense and not for the membership or the building of a criminal organization. So we do have a very wide range of responses by that you can see in Europe, and by that we also have a very wide range of evidence and understanding information available. I think the debate in Europe, we have a few scholars writing about it, but it's quite limited. So we're just at a starting point. Hopefully we can also contribute to get a better understanding, to enhance our knowledge through our forthcoming ENACT report.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. I know the response in Europe has been very complex. Some will even say Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni got into power because of her views on the Black Axe confraternities, and has strong views against immigration coming because of the fact that she links immigration and confraternities together. So yeah, indeed. Just in front of you, especially those online, you have the small survey. Please respond to it very quickly so that it can get off your screen. Thank you very much. I would like to open the floor. We've heard different strands of thoughts. On the one hand, what we heard from Christian was this is a very sophisticated group. It has a very complex structure, a structure that exists in layers, where you have criminality really at the bottom, and sometimes disassociated from the main group. Professor Etenabe is telling us that the two are not linked. You can have in every society individuals exploiting or leveraging on their organizations. While Emma just told us that she has encountered this, she's seen where the money is going to, she's seen the victims. These individuals are there. These things we're talking about are real. Let's hear from you. What do you think? What are your views? I already have online Rafio Adewale. You are saying that you've worked on similar issues, especially establishing a task force against killings of Nigerians, I think in South Africa. You say you want the floor, please. I will give you 2 minutes to share your views on this topic. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I've rightly said, I'm a Nigerian based in South Africa, and I've been in South Africa for 20 years. And for those past 20 years that I've been in South Africa, the Nigerian community have often experienced killings, kidnappings, intimidation, extortion from these groups. So in 2023, February to be precise, when I became the chairman of one of the Nigerian community associations in South Africa, my aim and set out was how we could bring these killings and kidnappings to an end. So in conjunction with the Nigerian High Commissioner, then former Nigerian High Commissioner and the consulate, I set out to form what is called the Nigerian Community Task Force on killings of Nigerians and kidnapping of Nigerians. And it will interest you to know that since 2023 up till recently, we're able to bring this thing into control. And how was that achieved? The way that was achieved was to bring on board, to form a committee and bring on board leadership of all the confraternities that exist in South Africa, which is the NBM, Black Axe, the Supreme Air Confraternity, the Mafite, the Tutus, these juries and everything. It consisted 6 bodies, and within that, there were two departments, which is the community leaders department, which consists all the heads of all these organizations, and then the task force community, which consists of 2 highly disciplined members from each of these groups. And we were able to achieve this, peace. If anyone is aware of the situations in South Africa, that for almost 3 years, there have been no bloodshed or killings by this organization. That is as a result of the task force. We work with law enforcement agencies and organizations, security organizations. We have anything, we give them information, we give them the names of people who are involved, but also we faced a lot of challenge from the South African security agencies because of corruption. They work hand in hand with these people. And recently, say in July, there have been a serious outbreak of this violence, especially within the Black Axe, the NBM, and the Vikings, the Norseman Club of Nigeria, which broke out in Durban and then in Gauteng. And like I said, we even personally wrote the police commissioner in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal.
Can you wrap up your thought? Can you wrap up your thought? Thank you.
Yes, I will. Okay, thank you. So basically, as it is said here, with NBM in South Africa, there are 2 groups, a group of people that want changes and group of people that do not want changes. And that is why there's a breakup, and also that has affected the task force, because initially the task force was working with the former South African zone, which people kicked against because of their way of life and what they do and what they do. I quite agree that this is the crime issue in NBM is not an organizational thing, but an individual thing. But unfortunately, most of people wanting to take up leadership are involved in criminalities and crime. So I feel it is very, very important that the NBM as an organization should filter the leadership, because this begins from the leadership. And I'll say it here categorically, the task force is open to work with South African security agencies to fish out bag eggs, give them names, give them all they need to prosecute these people. We are ready to do that.
Thank you very much. I think that's an excellent point for the South African law enforcement to work with task forces like yours. I think you both stand to benefit from this, and we need to promote these kind of initiatives which are meant to bring peace to communities. And especially, I congratulate you for the accomplishment that you've made in terms of reducing the killings. So bravo to you. Thank you very much. I hope that also answered the question that you posed before to Emma, so that we can save time and move to another participant. I have Elena who is asking, I would like to know more about Black Ass connection with human trafficking from Nigeria to Italy currently. Maybe, Daniel, can you take that one, or Christian, if you have any comment, or even you, Emma? But I will really strongly advise that you keep your comment really to 10 seconds, if possible, not surpassing 30 seconds, so that we can take another round of questions.
Yeah. Just a quick one on that. So when we see the dynamics in Europe, we see that mostly Nigerians are the ones that are exploited. And when we see the dynamic in Southern Africa, South Africa per se, South Africans are the ones that are, or let's say locals from South Africa are the ones that are exploited, as Emma highlighted. But if it comes to Europe, where necessary, they take the women to Europe for exploitation.
Thank you. Emma?
Yeah, I'm just going to emphasize that we have partners in Europe, and that's exactly what we've seen, the women being smuggled over the waters into Spain and definitely into Italy, but specifically for sexual exploitation. And then there's a grooming part that takes place where they actually groom the ladies to actually also become the criminals in the sector, but it's still male dominance.
Thank you. Yes, Daniel?
Yes, it's still happening, but it's going down. So in some European countries, when you talk to anti-trafficking NGOs in Germany, for example, you see that the numbers of Nigerian victims of human trafficking have been dramatically going down. This is one of the signs that actually Black Axe and other confraternities have moved away in Germany from human trafficking. In Italy, it's still happening, but we also have to consider that the crossing the Mediterranean, especially the route through Libya, is becoming extremely dangerous and risky. So also Nigerian women, that's one thing that is said. It's a broad set of kind of complex factors, but this is also one of the factors that has led to a decrease on that route.
Thank you. Prof, we'll spare you on this. Let's collect more questions, then we'll come to you. If you have reflection on this, you can add to that. Anyone in the room before we move back online? Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. For Dr. Annie, you had a wonderful set of recommendations there. How do you expect, or how do you anticipate to communicate them with Black Axe and with the South African government? And then for Emma, why did you refrain from mentioning in your book that your culprits were predominantly Nigerian? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good questions. Please, very quickly, if you can respond to.
Maybe I went on the UNODC where we don't shame a country. But no, I think it was to protect also the victims themselves, because there was such a strong network within the Nigerians and the females. So we had to protect the females. When I published the book, I had to use alias names and not so that the victim is protected firstly. So that was the aim, into protecting the victim and their identity, and not be specific on who the trafficker, because the case is actually still in court. So that was the reason.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, no, in terms of the recommendation, I think as ENACT and also the Institute for Security Studies, we want to deepen engagement with law enforcement agencies just to have a good understanding of, these confraternities. It's a gateway to understanding the criminal syndicates and individuals involved in crime. Yeah, and I think Martin and Willem as well are key actors in this. So I think we need to deepen that collaboration. And then lastly, in terms of the Black Axe members, there are some who are willing to engage in this kind of open debates, while others are not open to it. And actors like Rafiu, for instance, could play a role in, let's start in a debate through the National Commission and existing platforms.
Absolutely. There is a question online from Medina. My question is to Christian and Professor Alemika. Could you both kindly explain? Yeah, could you both kindly explain on the role of women in the MBM? The way they have been portrayed appears that they are only foot soldiers. Yeah, they are only foot soldiers with their agency determined by the male members of the organization. Do they also hold leadership roles? How influential and how influential have they been in the history and continue existence of the organization? So let's start with you, Prof, since the question is directly to you and Christian. What's your views on what the participant is asking?
I think historically, women until mid-80s did not play active role in fraternities in Nigeria. And that led to, in fact, much later, many female-based fraternity occurring. So, but when you look at the kinds of crime we're talking about which drew in women, in terms of black acts or whatever, criminality ascribed to their members, was the kind of crime they were involved in, for example, sex trafficking, human trafficking, and the rest of them. So in the structure, women are not really strong participants, or if you like, I say they were not factored in even in the membership, not to talk of leadership.
Thank you, Christian. Very quickly.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, yeah, within the dominant groups, women are not part of Black Arts. There's no way they're part of it. It's male-dominated specifically. But there were some groups like confraternities that emerged, as part of, confraternities on their own, as female confraternities. For instance, you have the Black Bra confraternity, you have Daughters of Jezebel confraternity that are also there, but mostly they are stooges to their male counterparts in that way, but they are not but they don't have this strong where necessary, but they can be used over time. Maybe just the girlfriends of these confraternity members playing a role within these female subsects.
Thank you. There is a question online, but let me check first in the room. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just want to ask, Ani, we know now the structure about the national leader, the high priest, the chairman, the eyes, the criers, and the butchers. Now, where fit the intelligence? Do they have an intelligence? Is the eyes the intelligence part? Or I believe there must be an intelligence part in this house. I think that's short enough.
Yeah. Very quick, and then maybe Prof, if you also have a response to it on the intelligence aspect.
Yes, they always have people who are involved in this, but more as the butcher, for instance, when we are talking about the national butcher, they are seen as the security officials there. They play a role in also, checking out things for the organization. And you also have, the national eye who also plays a role. So they do have, for instance, sometimes when I was having the interviews, they tell me that, there are men also who are vetted the process, who know, what you're doing. And those are the individuals that, relay information from relevant places where they are to the national team and to the butchers on how they react.
Yes. Prof, anyone word on that?
Maybe answer.
Yes, okay, please, very quick.
What we've seen on the ground is we've definitely seen an infiltration, a subtle infiltration of these members, starting almost like a sleeper cell within the areas, and some of them coming into South Africa under a different profile. Even their online presence, there's two names. So we've seen them infiltrate, and some of them linking to security companies, actually starting their own security companies. So there's definitely an intelligence aspect that they work with.
Thank you. Rob, you still want to come in? We are just 2 minutes away from our time. I just wanted to know in the room how many people have questions. I have 3 online, but it will be good to know how many in the room still have questions. Then we can manage our time well. Yes, who else in the room? Okay, yeah, Prof, if you want to comment very quickly on this, then we can move to the 3 other questions, which I hope will go very quickly.
I think the comment made is right in terms of intelligence. Basically, try to understand how this will work and then who are the drivers behind them. Generally, it's a responsibility of intelligence.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I have Medina question. Yeah, no, we've already answered this one, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is then Hangwani. Hangwani's question is, which other African countries have similar confraternities or criminal enterprise? What predisposes these countries or communities to employ darkness, depravity as a means of employment, financial or means, yeah, financial gains or means for employment, financial gain, such as global scale, in such a global scale. Sorry. So you want to respond to that very quick?
Well, no, just to say that, yeah, there's no predisposition. I think there's a lot of things, a lot of countries that have, you know, criminality that in various forms, maybe not organized, not organized, but things take up shape over time.
No, it's about, do we have this, we've talked about South Africa. Do we have these similar confraternities in other African countries? We know certainly Nigeria. Are they in Ghana? Are they in Southern Africa where we are? Are they in Zimbabwe? Are they in Zambia? Which other countries can we say they are?
Yeah, so the question can be too frank in terms of having, you know, the black house, as I said, is all across, but then also as different countries also having their specific criminal network. I would say, for instance, if you go to Ghana, for instance, talking issues about land guards and things like that. And then when you talk about Liberia, you have different actors who are involved in smuggling as well. You know, even you come to South Africa, you have different predisposition to specific kind of crime. But so I wanted to highlight the fact that, you know, criminality evolves as the countries, you know, or as societies, you know, shape up itself.
Good, thank you. I think we can take the question from Abdurrahman. Abdurrahman is asking, there is a nexus between black arts and criminality. Emma, the question is directed to you. And then to Daniel, actually hit Daniel actually hits the nail on the head. How have law enforcement agencies around the world been able to track illicit proceeds generated by these confraternities, particularly the black arts, through crypto channels? If I could have the floor. Well, sorry, it's too late. Let's just ask the speakers to answer it very quickly. Then we can conclude. Or there is one question from Nadina. Nadina is asking, do we know who the target market is? Right? Do we know who the target market is with regard to the sex trafficking, who they cater for, seeing that the organization runs it as a business? This is for you, Emma. So one for you, Christian, and one for you, Emma. Please, let's take our usual 30 seconds to respond, because we're already ahead of our time.
Okay, I'll be quick. I think the question on the human trafficking and the crime linking to black access is quite important. So we had criminal analysts actually taking the data, doing profiling on every individual, and that's when we saw the very clear link. Then we started researching on the black access specifically to see what of the behavior, and we spoke to the victims saying specific characteristics that actually but it was an online profiling that actually showed very clearly on this. Then the other question is the target market. I think it's about opportunity as well. I think each country, when it comes to sex trafficking, depending on we're looking at vulnerabilities of a victim. So what is the vulnerabilities? poverty, lack of education. So they will target, any trafficker will target the vulnerabilities of the area, of the nation, or looking at corruption. I think this, whether it's the black axis or not, even just the normal trafficker will look at vulnerabilities within a country and target those vulnerabilities. Corruption is a vulnerability, so they target that. And I do think they look at, it's all about money, so strong economic countries. But the previous question on, I've known even in Uganda and some other countries that have targeted. I mean, I've been to Thailand where we found victims of Uganda. They're trafficked by Nigerian groups.
Thank you very much. Christian, very quickly.
Yeah, no, when we're talking about how to track illicit proceeds generated by this confraternity, I think we need to go back to, in South Africa, as I said earlier on, there's very limited knowledge about confraternities, but they're operating across board. You know, when we try to speak to some officials about it, you realize that it's just, most of them are saying, okay, Nigerian individuals operating where necessary. So it will be good to, over time, you know, the agencies can begin to work on, you arrest someone, you trace, you know, where those confraternities come from. Not that all of them are part of confraternities, but you can be able to know, and from there you begin to build more cases and build more understanding of different other individuals or syndicate groups that are involved.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I know we have surpassed our time by 5 minutes. It was really an abuse on my side. I apologize. But as someone said online that this is an important topic, we needed certainly more time. I do agree with that. Hopefully, we'll be able to organize a follow-up seminar on this where we can allocate more time. I've seen that it's indeed an interesting topic, especially given that we are talking about a criminal group, and it is still not clear whether this is a criminal group or not, or it's being exploited by its members. As you said, Christian, I think that the burden is actually on the MBM to prove that it is not a criminal group and to eliminate criminal element within the group, so that we should not be having individuals committing crimes that are linked to MBM. I do also agree with Professor Etenabi that, the black ass activities are actually determined by the region where it is. So it takes the form of wherever it is. In Italy, it is different, just as it is different in Germany and Switzerland. It's different in South Africa. And therefore, these are individuals that indeed exploit the situation where they find themselves. But the leveraging of the organization is something that we need to prevent. I want to thank you all. I know it's that towards that last part of the year where we are so busy, and for you to have taken time to join us today is something that we hold very dear in our heart. So thank you for those of you online. Thank you for joining us wherever you're from. I know we had 45 at some point, or is it 50 participants, which I think shows great interest on the topic. And for you in the room, thank you indeed for joining us in person for us to discuss this issue. And Christian, once again, you've seen that there is great interest. I hope you'll be able to look at this topic, and that this is not the end of your research on the Black Ass Confraternity. In South Africa, there's still a lot more to do, especially in other regions. So this is, for me, a teaser that we should look at and then follow up with more research. Prof, thank you very much. Daniel, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the excellent presentations, for the panel, answering my questions very honestly, and shedding light, bringing to bear your experiences on the topic. So thank you. And this brings to an end our seminar. Thank you also to my colleagues, those who really work behind the scenes to make sure that we're here. Thank you, Richard, for organizing the technical aspect of the seminar. The seminar is closed. Thank you.